I've never been a fan of school field trips. But when our class planned a 3-day excursion to the Blue Ridge Mountains, I convinced my best friend Jason to join us. He was my opposite. Outgoing, reckless, always chasing the next thrill. His parents had just divorced, and he used any excuse to escape the tension at home. The trip started Friday morning. We loaded onto the bus with backpacks full of snacks and portable chargers, ready for 3 days away from civilization. Jason and I claimed seats in the back, playing cards and discussing video games while suburbs gave way to mountain landscapes outside our windows. Problems started when we entered the mountains. Clear skies turned gray within minutes. Snow began falling, light at first, then heavy enough that the bus wipers struggled to keep up. Our driver slowed to a crawl while Mr. Harris, our history teacher and trip leader, nervously checked weather forecasts on his phone. After an hour of crawling through the blizzard, the bus stopped completely. Mr. Harris announced that the road ahead was closed due to heavy snowfall. We'd have to make an unplanned stop in the nearest town, a small place called Pine Creek. The news triggered disappointed groans from students, but Jason seemed excited by this unexpected turn. Pine Creek was a typical mountain town. A few dozen houses, a couple of stores, a gas station. The only notable feature was Mountain Haven, a once popular ski resort on the mountainside above town. Judging by weathered signs and an empty parking lot, its glory days were long past. Mr. Harris and Mrs. Clark, our biology teacher, left to investigate accommodations while we waited on the bus. And Jason nudged me, pointing at the resort and explaining that according to him, Mountain Haven had been famous for extreme skiing, but lost popularity years ago to more modern resorts, and his father used to bring him here snowboarding. Half an hour later, our teachers returned with news. The road would be closed until morning. We'd spend the night in Pine Creek. The only place that could accommodate our group of 30 was Mountain Haven. The resort management agreed to take us in, though the season hadn't officially started, and most of the complex was closed for winter preparations. We gathered our things and walked up to the resort. The bus couldn't navigate the steep, snow-covered slope. Mountain Haven's main building was massive wooden structure in Alpine style, with a pointed roof and large windows. Once impressive, it now looked dilapidated. Paint peeled from exterior walls. Some windows were boarded with plywood. In the lobby, we met the manager, a thin man with tired eyes who introduced himself as Mr. Foster. He explained that due to off-season, the hotel operated with minimal staff. Only one of 3 residential sections was available. Some amenities like the pool and restaurant would be unavailable. Mr. Harris began assigning rooms. Jason and I ended up last on the list. When our turn came, only one room remained. In the far wing of the building, separated from the main section by a long, dimly lit corridor. The manager apologized, explaining this part of the hotel was technically closed for renovation, but our room had been recently updated and was habitable. Mr. Harris looked uncertain but had no choice. He handed us the key and reminded us of the rules, especially not to leave our room after curfew or explore closed areas of the hotel. Jason nodded seriously, but I recognized that gleam in his eyes. Rules were about to be broken. Our room was at the end of a long corridor lit by sparse lamps. We passed rooms with doors sealed with tape and "Do Not Enter" signs. Sections of walls were covered with plastic sheeting. The air smelled of paint and construction dust. The room itself was better than expected. 2 single beds, a small TV, a bathroom with shower, and a balcony with a view of mountains and ski lifts. Jason immediately threw his backpack down and looked out the window, admiring snow-covered slopes. After dinner in a small cafeteria, most students gathered for a documentary about mountain nature. Jason and I sat through half before he whispered that he wanted to return to our room. He had a better idea than watching trees grow in slow motion. We slipped out unnoticed and returned to our wing. On the way, Jason told me he'd noticed a service exit near our room that seemed to lead directly to the chairlift. He suggested exploring the resort grounds at night, after everyone went to bed. I reminded him of Mr. Harris's prohibition, but Jason waved it off. Back in our room, we discovered the heating wasn't working well. It was chilly. Jason pulled out a small metal flask from his backpack, whiskey he'd stolen from his stepfather's bar. He offered me a sip to warm up. I declined. We spent the next few hours playing cards. Outside, darkness fell and snowfall intensified. Wind howled around the building, sometimes so strongly that window frames rattled. The lights flickered, hinting at unreliable wiring. Around 10, Mr. Harris knocked on our door, making his rounds before curfew. He reminded us everyone should be in their rooms by 11. He warned that due to the snowstorm, there might be power outages and left us a flashlight. As soon as the teacher left, Jason pulled out another prohibited item, a small folding knife he always took on hikes. According to him, the knife might come in handy during our night excursion. I began doubting whether we should go at all, but Jason was determined. At 11:30, making sure the corridor was quiet, we prepared to leave. Jason insisted we dress warmly. Jackets, hats, gloves, scarves. We took our phones with fully charged batteries to use as flashlights. Slipping out, we quietly walked down the dark corridor to the service exit Jason had noticed earlier. The door was unlocked. Outside, cold wind and heavy snowfall met us. Visibility was limited to a few meters, but Jason seemed to know exactly where to go. We trudged through snowdrifts, holding onto the building wall so as not to get lost in the blizzard. After a few minutes, we reached a small technical building connected to the lower chairlift station. The door was locked, but nearby was a platform providing access to the lift itself. To our surprise, the lift looked functional. The gondolas had been removed, but the cable with chair seats for summer operation remained. Next to the platform was a control panel covered with a protective casing. Jason approached the panel and began studying it. According to him, his father had once worked at a ski resort and shown him how such systems operated. After a few minutes, he claimed he understood how to start the lift. I protested, saying this was no longer just exploring, but actual breaking and entering. But Jason was in that special mood where nothing could stop him. He reminded me we'd already broken rules by leaving the hotel at night, so we might as well go all the way. After several attempts, Jason managed to open the control panel. Inside were several switches and an emergency start button. He pressed a few switches, and to our surprise, the system came to life. A low hum filled the air, and the cable with chairs slowly began moving. We quickly took seats on a 2-person chair and began ascending the slope. As we climbed higher, wind intensified and visibility worsened. Snow hit our faces. I began regretting my decision, but Jason was ecstatic, pointing to town lights below flickering through the snow veil. About halfway up, I noticed strange movement at the base of the mountain, near the station where we'd started. At first, I thought it was shadows or snow distorting my vision, but then I clearly saw a human figure moving along the lift line. I pointed this out to Jason, and he took out his phone to use the camera as binoculars. In zooming in, we could make out a man in dark clothing examining the control panel we just used. Suddenly, the lift stopped with a sharp jerk, causing our chair to sway violently in the wind. We were suspended high above the ground in the middle of a snowstorm, while below was an unknown person who clearly wasn't a resort employee. Jason tried to get a better look through his phone camera, and in dim light from the station building, we could see the stranger wore a torn jacket, with his movements seeming nervous and jerky. But the most disturbing thing was that even from this distance, we could see his face and hands were covered with something dark that looked frighteningly like blood. Our chair swayed in the icy wind, creaking with each gust. We were stuck about 15 meters above the ground. The stranger was fiddling with the control panel, opening and closing it as if he didn't understand how it worked. At one point, he looked up and seemed to stare directly at us. I instinctively ducked down. Jason ducked too and whispered that we needed to stay still. He turned off his phone flashlight and I followed. Now we sat in complete darkness, illuminated only by dim light reflecting off snow. We stayed like that for several minutes, shivering not from cold but from fear. Finally, Jason carefully peeked out and reported the man was still down there but had moved away from the control panel. Suddenly, the lift came back to life with a loud mechanical grinding. Our chair jerked and began moving slowly, but not up toward the mountaintop, back toward the station where the stranger stood. Panic seized me. The man had figured out the controls. He was bringing us down, bringing us directly to him. Jason maintained surprising calm. He quickly assessed the situation and pointed to metal support towers we were passing. According to him, if we could reach one, we could climb down using the maintenance ladder. The problem was, the nearest tower was several meters ahead. We needed to wait until our chair approached it, then quickly transfer to the platform. One wrong step meant falling. As our chair approached the tower, Jason prepared himself. He took off his gloves and tucked them into his pockets to better feel metal handrails. I followed his example, though my hands were already numb from cold. The moment arrived. The chair lined up with the maintenance platform, and Jason, without hesitation, jumped onto it. I was supposed to follow immediately, but at the last moment I hesitated. The distance seemed too great, the platform too small and slippery with snow. Jason reached out his hand, yelling for me to jump. The chair had already begun moving away. In desperation, I pushed off and jumped, barely grabbing the edge of the platform. My feet slipped, and for a moment I hung in the air, holding onto only the slippery metal edge. Jason grabbed my jacket, and with effort, pulled me onto the platform. We both lay on the cold metal, breathing heavily. Around us, the blizzard raged. Below, at the station, that strange man was still present. We needed to climb down the ladder without attracting his attention. The ladder was narrow and icy, with no railings in some sections. We began descending, trying to move as quietly as possible. Each step was a challenge. Metal rungs were covered with ice and snow, and strong wind threatened to knock us off. Halfway down, Jason stopped and gestured for me to do the same. He pointed downward, where in dim light we could make out the moving figure. The man appeared to be circling the base of the tower we were on. If he looked up, he would surely spot us. We froze, pressing ourselves against cold metal, trying not even to breathe. The man stopped directly beneath us and seemed to be listening. Then he took something out of his pocket. In dim light, a metallic object gleamed. A knife, long and serrated. At that moment, my phone vibrated. An automatic weather alert warning of severe blizzard. The sound was muffled by layers of clothing, but in the tense silence it seemed deafening. The stranger sharply looked up. Even through falling snow, I could see his face. Pale, gaunt, with dark streaks that really did look like dried blood. His eyes locked onto ours. For a moment, nobody moved. Then he smiled. A cold, predatory smile that made my blood freeze. He started climbing the ladder. Jason didn't hesitate. He grabbed my arm and pulled me upward back toward the platform. We scrambled up the icy rungs, our hands slipping, our feet barely finding purchase. Below, the man climbed steadily, methodically, like he'd done this 1,000 times before. We reached the platform and Jason looked around desperately. The lift was still running, chairs passing by every few seconds. He pointed to an approaching chair, and I understood immediately. We had to jump back onto the moving lift. The timing had to be perfect. Too early and we'd miss. Too late and the man would reach us. I could hear him now, his breathing heavy, his boots scraping against metal rungs. He was close. Too close. Jason counted down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. We jumped. I caught the chair's safety bar, my body swinging wildly in the wind. Jason landed beside me and we pulled ourselves up onto the seat. The chair carried us away from the tower, away from the man who'd almost reached the platform. I looked back and saw him standing there watching us ascend. He didn't try to follow. Just stood there, knife in hand, that same cold smile on his face, as if he knew something we didn't. The lift carried us higher up the mountain, away from the station, away from any chance of reaching the hotel safely. We were heading toward the summit, into the heart of the blizzard, with no way down except through the forest. Jason's face was grim. He knew what I knew. We'd traded one danger for another. The lift reached the upper station and automatically slowed. We jumped off onto the platform, our legs shaking from adrenaline and cold. The summit was completely deserted. The wind howled through abandoned equipment. Snow had drifted against the walls of a small maintenance building. Jason tried the door. Locked. He looked around, spotted a window with a broken pane. We climbed through, cutting our hands on jagged glass, but we were beyond caring. Inside was dark and cold, but at least we were out of the wind. We huddled in a corner trying to catch our breath and think. My phone showed it was past 1 in the morning. The battery was at 30%. No signal. Jason suggested we wait until dawn, then try to find a trail down the mountain that would bypass the lower station. It was risky. We could get lost in the forest, freeze to death. But going back down the lift meant facing that man again. We sat in silence, listening to the wind. Every creak of the building made us jump. Every shadow seemed to move. Then we heard it. Footsteps, crunching through snow, getting closer. He'd followed us. Somehow he'd made it up the mountain. Jason grabbed my arm and pointed to a door at the back of the building. We moved as quietly as we could, opened it, and found ourselves in a storage room filled with old ski equipment. Another door led outside, to the back of the building. We slipped out into the blizzard just as the front door crashed open behind us. Now we were running through deep snow, into the forest with no idea where we were going. Trees loomed out of the darkness like skeletal hands. The wind screamed through the branches. Behind us, I could hear him. Not running, just walking. Steady, relentless. Jason spotted what looked like a trail and we followed it, stumbling through drifts that came up to our thighs. My lungs burned, my legs felt like lead, but terror kept me moving. The trail led downward, winding through the trees. We followed it for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. The sounds of pursuit faded. Maybe we lost him. Maybe he'd given up. Then the trail opened onto a clearing and I saw lights in the distance. The hotel. We'd somehow circled back around. We emerged from the forest on the opposite side of the building from where we'd started. The service door was still there, still unlocked. We slipped inside, our clothes soaked, our hands and faces numb from cold. The corridor was silent. We made it back to our room without seeing anyone. Inside, we locked the door, pushed the dresser against it, and collapsed. Neither of us spoke. We just sat there shivering, listening to every sound in the building. Sleep didn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smile. That cold, knowing smile. In the morning, Mr. Harris knocked on our door, announcing breakfast. He mentioned the roads had been cleared and we'd be leaving after we ate. We quickly got ready and went down to the cafeteria. Everyone was discussing the snowstorm. No one had noticed our absence. During breakfast, the local sheriff entered with 2 deputies. They spoke with the hotel manager, who looked pale and shaken. Then the sheriff addressed the group. There had been an incident in a neighboring town, an armed robbery. The clerk had been killed. The suspect had fled into the mountains and was believed to be in the area. The sheriff described him, about 40, medium height, possibly injured, blood on his clothes. The description matched perfectly. The sheriff asked if anyone had seen anything suspicious. Jason and I sat frozen. We should tell them. We should say something. But then I remembered that smile. The way he'd climbed that ladder. The way he'd followed us through the blizzard. And I realized, if we told them we'd seen him, if we became witnesses, we'd be putting targets on our backs. The sheriff waited. No one spoke up. After breakfast, we loaded onto the bus. As we pulled away from Mountain Haven, I looked back at the snow-covered slopes. Somewhere up there in those forests, he was still out there. The rest of the trip passed in a blur. We visited Blue Ridge Historical Park, but I couldn't focus. My mind kept returning to that night. When we got home, I searched the news every day. Waited for an announcement that they'd caught him. But it never came. A week passed. 2 weeks. A month. Nothing. Then, 3 months later, I saw a brief article buried in the local news section. A hiker had found human remains in the woods near Pine Creek. The body had been there for several months, partially preserved by the cold. The victim was identified as Robert Foster, the manager of Mountain Haven Resort. He'd been reported missing the day after we left. His body was found less than a mile from the hotel, in the forest on the mountainside. Cause of death: multiple stab wounds. The article mentioned that police were investigating but had no suspects. It also noted that Foster had been alone at the resort that night. The other staff members had left before the snowstorm hit. I called Jason. He'd seen the article too. We both knew what it meant. The man we'd encountered hadn't just been hiding at the resort. He'd killed the manager. Probably that same night, maybe even while we were out on the mountain. And then he'd seen us. 2 witnesses who could place him at the scene. That's why he chased us. Not random violence. Elimination of witnesses. And he'd gotten away with it. Jason asked if we should go to the police now. Tell them what we saw. But what could we tell them? We seen a man with blood on his face. We didn't know his name. Couldn't identify him beyond a vague description. And we'd have to admit we'd been breaking rules, trespassing, starting equipment we had no business touching. Our testimony would be worthless, and it would make us visible, make us targets. We decided to stay silent. That was 5 years ago. I'm in college now. Jason and I still talk, but we never discussed that night. Not directly. But sometimes, on winter nights when snow falls heavy and the wind howls, I wake up from the same nightmare. I'm back on that chairlift, swaying in the darkness. And below me, a figure stands in the snow, looking up, smiling that cold smile. And I wonder if he remembers us. 2 boys who saw him that night. 2 witnesses who got away. I wonder if he's still out there somewhere in those mountains, waiting. And I wonder if someday he'll come looking for us to finish what he started. Because some debts, I've learned, are never forgotten, and some smiles promise that the hunt isn't over. It's just paused.
We moved to Maple Street 3 days before Halloween, and Lily was thrilled about the new house, new neighborhood, and new friends, while I was exhausted from still unpacking boxes as she ran through empty rooms with her laughter echoing off bare walls. It was a 2-story house with a small backyard in a quiet suburb, everything we needed after the divorce, and it represented a fresh start where Lily could forget the screaming, the slammed doors, and her father's car disappearing down the driveway for the last time. Just the 2 of us now, mother and daughter against the world. But late at night, when the house creaked with unfamiliar sounds and Lily cried out from nightmares, I wondered if I was enough and if I could protect her alone. The neighbors seemed friendly with an elderly couple waving from the right and a young family bringing cookies from the left, which was normal and safe. Everything I wanted. On October 29th, someone knocked at 6 p.m., and a woman about 50 stood at my door with a neat haircut, tense smile, and folder in hand. Mrs. Carol Henderson introduced herself as the Homeowners Association president and said she had something important to share before Halloween. I invited her in while upstairs Lily's feet pattered across floorboards as she hummed that princess song from her favorite cartoon. The one she sang constantly, and the sound made my chest ache. Mrs. Henderson sat at the kitchen table and pulled out papers, explaining these were Halloween safety rules, and she knew it seemed excessive, but there had been incidents, and these rules existed for a reason. She handed me a sheet. Halloween safety rules, Maple Street and surrounding areas first. All children must finish trick-or-treating by 8 p.m., because after this time, the streets are unsafe. Second, do not approach the house at 237 Maple Street, under any circumstances because the house is empty and dangerous. Third, if your child receives a white candy without wrapper, immediately throw it away. Do not let your child eat it, and do not touch it with bare hands. Fourth, do not open the door after 9 p.m., even if you hear children's voices or knocking, because it is not children. Fifth, if you or your child see a person in a clown costume, ignore them completely. Do not make eye contact. Do not speak. Do not react, and act as if they do not exist. Sixth, if your child says someone invites them inside a house, immediately leave that house and call police. Seventh, keep all outdoor lights on all night because darkness attracts unwanted attention. I stared at the list because the rules seemed paranoid and absurd, and I said these are very specific. Mrs. Henderson's hands trembled as she closed her folder and said these rules are written in blood, and each one exists because something happened, something bad. She was already standing and gathering her things, saying, "Please follow them," especially with a little girl, because Halloween in this neighborhood isn't like other places. She left me with the rules and growing unease. That night, I searched online and found a news article from 5 years ago titled, "Child Disappears on Halloween in Suburb," reporting that 8-year-old Ethan Wilson vanished on Halloween night and was last seen trick-or-treating on Maple Street at 8:30 p.m., but he was never found. Another article from 3 years ago reported that a 6-year-old girl disappeared on Halloween, and they found her 2 weeks later in an abandoned house, dead. I went upstairs and watched Lily sleep with her small body curled under blankets and her stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hoppy, clutched to her chest, while the nightlight cast dancing shadows across her peaceful face. I would protect her because I had to. On October 30th, we carved a pumpkin together, and Lily chose triangle eyes and a toothy smile while her small hands struggled with the scooping and got covered in orange pulp, and she laughed and called it pumpkin guts and monster brains. These moments, her laughter and her joy, these were everything. We placed the lit pumpkin on the porch while neighbors decorated their lawns with ghosts and tombstones. But one house remained dark. House 237, which was abandoned with boarded windows, overgrown lawn, peeling paint, and a porch collapsed on one side. And looking at it made my skin crawl because something about it felt intentionally wrong. That evening I told Lily the rules in a simplified and less scary way as just precautions. Home by 8, don't take white candy, and if you see a clown, walk past. She nodded with eyes wide and asked if this was a strange neighborhood. I smiled and said, "No, sweetheart. People here are just careful because they want everyone safe." But that night, I couldn't shake my anxiety because tomorrow was Halloween, and something about this neighborhood was wrong. October 31st began bright and sunny, and Lily woke excited, dancing around in her princess costume. Pink dress with sparkles, plastic crown, and magic wand. I watched her twirl in the kitchen with the costume swishing, and felt my throat tighten because she looked so happy and so innocent, and I wondered how I could keep the world from touching her. At 6 p.m., we went out with Lily holding my hand and her bag empty and ready, and her palm was small and warm, so I squeezed perhaps too tight. The street filled with children and laughter and parents with cameras, which was typical Halloween, but I couldn't relax because I scanned every face and memorized every shadow. We went house to house as Lily rang doorbells, shouted trick or treat, and collected candy while her bag gradually filled, and I checked every piece, finding so far everything looked normal. Then we approached a house on the corner where an old man opened the door, smiling and holding a bowl of candy. Something about his smile made my stomach clench because it was too wide and too eager. "What a lovely princess," he said. Lily smiled and held out her bag, and he dropped something in. I saw it for only a second. White, no wrapper, round like a mint. Rule number 3. I pulled Lily away immediately and she protested, but I didn't stop. Under a street lamp, I opened her bag and found the white candy on top, perfectly round like chalk with no markings, and I used a napkin to remove it without touching with bare hands, because the surface felt powdery and wrong. I threw it in a trash can. Lily pouted and said that was candy. "No, honey," I said. "Someone might have put something bad in it." My heart wouldn't slow, and I checked my phone. 7:45, which meant 15 minutes until 8. "One more block, then home, okay?" I asked. Lily agreed with her bag heavy with candy. We turned the corner, and there in the middle of the block I saw him, the clown. Tall, with full costume including bright wig, white face, red nose, and big shoes. But the costume was too old and worn, and the makeup was running in dark streaks, and he just stood there motionless, watching children pass while his head turned slowly, tracking them. Rule number 5. Lily pointed and said, "Look, Mom, a clown." "Don't look at him," I said. "Let's go." I quickened my pace while gripping her hand tighter, but as we passed I felt it, his gaze, and the clown was staring straight at us with his eyes visible through makeup, dark and empty and dead, and he didn't move or speak but just watched. My pulse hammered, and the street seemed endless. "Why didn't we say hello?" Lily asked, confused. "We need to get home now," I said. I looked back once, and the clown's head had turned following us, and a chill ran down my spine. We reached home at 7:58, and I locked the door, slid the chain, and checked it twice. Lily sorted her candy at the kitchen table while I checked every piece again, finding all were wrapped and all normal, and she ate a few, then went upstairs, where I helped her out of the costume and hung it on her chair, and she brushed her teeth while humming her princess song. I tucked her in with Mr. Hoppy under her arm. "Best Halloween ever," she said. I kissed her forehead and said, "I love you. Sleep tight." My throat felt tight because she looked so small and so trusting. I closed her door. In bed, I couldn't sleep and listened to the night sounds as children's shouts gradually quieted, and I watched the clock. 8:15, 8:30, 8:45, and then 9 p.m., rule number 4. Then I heard it, knocking on the door, quiet but insistent, and a child's voice saying trick or treat. I checked the clock. 9:17 p.m. The knocking repeated louder with multiple voices saying, "Please, we want candy." Rule number 4 was clear. Do not open the door. I lay frozen with heart pounding. The knocking continued for a minute, 2 minutes, and 5 minutes before it stopped, leaving only silence. Maybe they left. Then a new sound came, scratching on the door, slow and methodical, like nails on wood, and the sound made my teeth ache. And the voice again, changed and deeper and wrong, saying, "Let us in. We know you're home." I went to the window and looked at the porch, but no one was there, though the door handle was turning slowly as someone tried to open it. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911, but then everything stopped, leaving only silence. I waited 15 minutes before going downstairs and checked on Lily first, still asleep with Mr. Hoppy clutched tight and breathing soft. I looked through the peephole, and the street was empty with just street lamps and rustling leaves. But on the porch right in front of the door lay a white candy, round and unwrapped, identical to the one from earlier. Someone had been here on my porch, and someone knew where we lived, and the candy sat like a message and a promise. I didn't sleep, but sat in the living room with all lights on, watching the street with phone in hand. November 1st came with gray skies and cold wind. Lily woke cheerful and unaware, eating cereal and chattering about her candy, while the white candy still lay on the porch. I used a dustpan and gloves to remove it and sealed it in a plastic bag. Then I went to Mrs. Henderson's house. She opened the door with face immediately wary and asked if everything was okay and about my daughter. "Lily's fine," I said, "but I need to talk about the rules." She led me to her kitchen and poured coffee with shaking hands. I told her everything, the white candy, the clown, the knocking, and the candy on the porch. Mrs. Henderson grew paler with each word and said quietly that the rules exist because we learned the hard way. The white candies contain sedatives and are given by someone on this street who marks children, drugs them, and then takes them. My stomach twisted. The clown is his accomplice who marks houses where children are alone and where parents aren't careful. And after 9, they check who would open the door. "Why don't police do anything?" I asked. She laughed bitterly and said we called many times, but there's no evidence because children disappear on different nights and different years, so police think it's coincidence. Her face changed and became soft and deeply sad. "I had a grandson once," she said, "Thomas, 7 years old, who stayed with me one Halloween 15 years ago. And I followed the rules, all of them. But I left him alone for just 20 minutes to go to the pharmacy, with doors locked and lights on, and when I came back, the back door was open, and Thomas was gone, and they found his jacket a week later, but nothing else, ever. That's when I started the rules and made them official," she said, "and some people laughed and called me paranoid, but some listened, and their children came home." She squeezed my hand and said, "You did right yesterday. Your daughter is safe, but be careful, because they marked you." I returned home, feeling sick. That evening when Lily was asleep, I sat by the window and saw him, the clown, standing across the street under a dark lamp with face turned toward my house, watching, and the white makeup gleamed while he didn't move, but just watched where my daughter slept. I closed the curtains, locked all windows, and checked every lock twice, but I knew this wasn't the end, because they marked us and they would return. A week passed with normal routine, Lily to school and me working from home, and I checked locks obsessively, kept lights on all night, and installed better locks, while Mrs. Henderson called every few days to check, and her voice always had that edge of worry. Everything was okay until November 7th. I needed milk and bread for a quick trip to the corner store, just 15 minutes, and Lily had come home from school an hour ago and was upstairs playing. "I'm going to the store," I called up. "Okay, Mommy," she called back. I hesitated at the door because something made me want to stay, but it was just 15 minutes. Lily was 6 and responsible, and I'd lock the door, so it would be fine. I left. The store was crowded with lines longer than expected, and I checked my phone constantly. 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, before I abandoned my cart, grabbed milk and bread, and went to Express Lane. 30 minutes. I drove home too fast and pulled into the driveway where everything looked normal with door closed and locked. But when I entered, everything was quiet. Too quiet. "Lily, I'm home." No answer. I checked every room. Kitchen empty, living room empty, and upstairs her room was empty, with bed made, toys in place, and Mr. Hoppy sitting on the pillow, alone, as if she'd never been there. Panic rose like bile, and I called Lily's friend with shaking hands. The mother answered and said she left an hour ago, and said her mom was waiting. I wasn't home because I was at the store. I hung up and called police, and my voice came out wrong, high-pitched, with words that made no sense. They arrived in 20 minutes. I explained that Lily was missing. I'd left her alone for 30 minutes, and she was gone. They asked questions about whether she could be with friends or relatives, or if she ran away. No, she was 6, and I knew what happened, so I told them about the rules, the candy, and House 237. They looked at each other, and one of them knew because I saw it in his eyes. They searched, called neighbors, checked the yard, and reviewed security footage, but found nothing. Lily had vanished in 30 minutes. By 10 p.m., the search expanded with more officers, volunteers, and dogs, and the street filled with flashlights and voices calling her name. I stood on the porch, unable to move, and unable to breathe. Mrs. Henderson came, said nothing, and just hugged me, and I felt her body shaking. Or maybe it was mine. Halloween was over, but the hunter hadn't stopped because they'd been watching and waiting for me to make a mistake, and I had. Rule number 8, the rule that didn't exist yet. Around midnight, an officer approached and said they needed to check vacant buildings, asking if any houses were abandoned. House 237. Officers headed there immediately, and I followed because they couldn't stop me. House 237 stood dark and ominous, and officers broke down the door with a battering ram before entering with flashlights and guns. I waited outside where every second stretched like eternity. Then an officer came out, with face pale, and said, "There's a basement, and don't go down there." But I was already running, pushing past him and flying down the stairs into darkness. And I saw a cell with a mattress in the corner stained with things I didn't want to identify. A chain attached to the wall with metal worn smooth from years of use, and broken toys scattered across the floor, while the air smelled of mold and urine and fear. And on the mattress, neatly folded, lay Lily's princess costume. Pink dress with sparkles, plastic crown, and magic wand, and the sparkles caught the flashlight beam and glittered. But Lily wasn't there. Officers found a door to a tunnel that was old and moldy and going underground, and they followed it with dogs while I waited upstairs, sat on the floor, and stared at nothing. An hour later they returned, and one officer held a plastic bag containing dozens of white candies, all unwrapped and all identical, arranged in neat rows on a shelf in the tunnel like inventory. A detective approached, young and trying to look professional, and said they found evidence because this place had been used for a long time, with photos on walls and names carved in wood, and they would keep searching. But he had to be honest. He didn't finish because he didn't need to. Lily wasn't the first. 3 weeks of police interviews and search parties and news cameras followed, but Lily was never found. Police arrested the old man with white candies, Robert Gray, a registered sex offender under a false name, and they found the clown, Thomas Gray, his brother, and they'd worked together for years, moving neighborhood to neighborhood with a system where one marked children with candy, and the other watched houses and noted which parents were careless. House 237 belonged to them, and the tunnel led to another house 2 blocks away with a garage containing a van and restraints bolted to the floor, where they found children, drugged them, transported them, and sold them. And police found records with names, dates, and photographs showing a network spanning years, and states with dozens of children. Lily was on the list as number 47, but they never found her, and the brothers wouldn't talk and lawyered up, so with circumstantial evidence but no body, they faced kidnapping charges and maybe 20 years, but Lily was still gone. I left after a month and returned to the city to a small apartment, far from Maple Street, and far from the life where I had a daughter. Mrs. Henderson came before I left and brought updated rules for the next families, because 7 rules became 8. Halloween safety rules, Maple Street and surrounding areas. First, all children must finish trick-or-treating by 8 p.m. because after this time the streets are unsafe. Second, do not approach the house at 237 Maple Street, because the house was a crime scene and entering is dangerous. Third, if your child receives a white candy without wrapper, immediately throw it away. Do not let your child eat it. Do not touch it with bare hands, and call police. Fourth, do not open the door after 9 p.m., even if you hear children's voices or knocking, because it is not children. Fifth, if you or your child see a person in a clown costume, immediately leave the area and call police. Sixth, if your child says someone invites them inside a house, immediately call 911. Seventh, keep all outdoor lights on all night because darkness attracts unwanted attention. Eighth, never leave children unsupervised on Halloween, not even for a minute, and not even in your own home, because they will not return. I took the list with shaking hands, because the 8th rule was written for Lily, for me, and for the lesson I learned too late. I left her alone for 30 minutes to get milk and bread, 30 minutes that felt harmless, but everything happened in 30 minutes. Now I live in an apartment without Halloween decorations, and without photographs, because I can't bear to see her face. Every October 31st, I lock all locks, turn off lights, close curtains, unplug the doorbell, and put in earplugs, then sit in the dark and try not to remember. But I always do remember her humming that princess song, the way she held Mr. Hoppy, the sparkles on her costume catching light, and her small hand in mine trusting me to keep her safe, and how she said it was the best Halloween ever. I failed. Sometimes, deep at night, I hear knocking on my apartment door, and a child's voice saying, "Mommy, let me in. I'm home. I'm cold. I'm scared. Please." And the voice is perfect with every inflection, and her slight lisp on S sounds exactly like her. But I don't open because I know the rules and I learned them, and on the other side is not my daughter and never was, because Lily didn't return and never will. But sometimes I stand at that door with hand on the lock and wonder, what if this time it really is her? What if she escaped? What if she made it home? And what if I'm leaving her out there in the dark, calling for her mother who won't open the door? But I know better because the rules exist for a reason, written in blood and learned too late. 3 months later, I received something in the mail, a plain white envelope with no return address, and my name and new address in neat block letters, and inside was a single photograph showing Lily standing against a gray wall in a plain gray dress with hair shorter, face blank, and eyes empty. alive, but not alive, and in her hand was a white candy, while on the back it said, "She's ours now." Rule 8 came too late. Thank you for the gift. I dropped it and stood shaking, unable to breathe, because they'd found me. I called the detective, and he came immediately and took the photo, saying they'd investigate and trace it, but I knew they'd find nothing because this wasn't about being caught, but about control, showing me that even with the brothers in jail, and even with 237 demolished, they could still reach me, and still hurt me. That night, another white candy appeared outside my door, and I called police and waited for them to bag it, and the message was clear. The rules didn't save Lily, and they won't save the next child. Because somewhere, someone is still giving out white candies, still watching houses, and waiting for careless parents, and the brothers were just 2. But the network is bigger and deeper and still operating. Every Halloween somewhere in America, another mother receives a list of rules written in blood, rules that might not be enough. Mrs. Henderson prints more copies every year, delivers them personally to new families, and makes them promise to read every word and to never leave their children alone, not even for a minute, and not even in their own home, because they will not return. And somewhere in America, someone is preparing for Halloween by buying white candies, checking lists of new families, and looking for the careless ones, the ones who think it can't happen to them, and who will leave their children alone just for a minute, just to run to the store, because nothing bad has happened yet. And the rules are being written again in fresh blood for children who are still safe, still alive, and still home, but not for long.